to everybody who's joined here this evening in India. And I say this because we are on day 4 of the RISE PecoWorld Summit 2025, which has till date had more than 9,000 attendees from more than 82 countries across the world. So I have no idea where you're joining from right now, but I'd like to wish you a wonderful, wonderful day any which way. So today we are in for a treat as we come to the end of the 4th day, 4 days which have seen intense discussions, workshops, roundtables on a variety of topics, all related or revolving around the Sustainable Development Goals. We've had some entertaining sessions on music. We have had some very serious discussions on CSR, environment, Sustainable Development Goals themselves. And today we are in for a treat because today we are in this final session on day 4 is a workshop on responsible screenwriting. Now, films is as much a part of culture as it is a medium of imparting information, bringing about social change, and that's true for any part of the world. And today we felt this would be a wonderful workshop to bring to people. And it doesn't matter which stream you are from, what profession you're from, or what line of work you're from, this would be something that completely resonates with you and which you can possibly use to in your day-to-day life and trying to communicate better and get your stories told in a much more impactful way. And I must say, we are extremely proud that we have 2 amazing resource people who have come on board to actually conduct this session. So I'm excited as much as I hope you are. So without further ado, because I don't want to hog the screen out here, I would like to give a quick introduction to both our resource people. First up, we have with us John, that is Sab John Edathattil. He's a screenwriter and producer known as Sab John. He's known by his pen name Sab John, rather. He's one of the leading screenwriting and storytelling voices of South India, especially in the Malayalam and Tamil film industries. He's the chief mentor at Screenwrite.in, India's only screenwriting studio he founded in 2009, and a visiting professor and head of screenwriting at the L.V. Prasad Film and Television Academy, which from 2009 to 2018, and the L.V. Prasad College of Media Studies, which is from 2021 right to present. During his 34-year screenwriting career, which included 32 produced screenplays, many teleplays, and brand campaign scripts, John wrote a dazzling range of subjects, sharing visceral portraits of cinematic entertainment. Incidentally, John is also an actor and occasional director. John loves working with young aspiring writers in India, propagating professional screenwriting through his much acclaimed online workshops. John is into producing a short film and a feature under his startup venture, GEM, that is JEM Studio, LLP. Welcome, John. Welcome, Sab. It's absolutely amazing and a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Naresh, for your kind words.
It's truly an honor. It's only a pleasure because I've known the kind of films that you have. For the audience out here, I think John's first film, where he wrote a script, was with Kamala Hassan. And then he's actually made movies with the who's who of South Indian cinema. So, having him on the RISE platform with us is an honor. Well, our second resource person is also an equally adept and equally feted scriptwriter, filmmaker. Ravi Karmalker, incidentally born in Bombay in 1963, grew up in India, Germany, and Brussels as the son of a German mother and Indian father. He's a German film producer, showrunner, screenwriter, and director. He works in Cologne and in Nairobi, Kenya. So he started his whole journey by actually doing reportage for radio, after which he moved on to documentaries, and he's now into television serials and feature films across continents. So Ravi's films and TV series have received 36 nominations and first prizes at German and international film festival. Since 2017, he has been producing TV series and feature films, mainly in collaboration with Netflix and ZDF Arthur. And for the last several years, Ravi was based in Nairobi, Kenya, and where he actually took an interest in African films and started promoting Kenyan films especially. He's also the producer of the first ever Kenyan teleseries to be streamed on Netflix, and also the producer and co-director of the first Kenyan movie to be aired on Netflix. So Ravi, welcome as well. I think between the two of them, you not only have three continents being represented, three different cultures being represented, but more than 60 years of amazing screenwriting, script writing experience coming to the fore. Yeah, am I right? Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
yes.
So yeah, so
Absolutely.
I'm
Thank
going to
you.
get, I'm going to be out of the scene. I just want to sit back and enjoy this. And all the very best. Over to you, Sab and Ravi. Take care.
Thank you, Naresh.
You very much. Thanks very much, Naresh, for your kind words of introduction. And hi, Ravi. I'm so happy that we are taking this together. Um, so here, going to straight to the topicality of what we have here. It's about screenwriting and probably responsible screenwriting. This is something that I wanted to discuss here because we come up with screenplays and lots of writers come up now with the technology going into probably filmmaking has become a lot cheaper. The equipment has become a lot cheaper, inexpensive compared to earlier times. So now we have lots of content coming online and as videos or short films or longer narratives like web series and feature flicks. So this is a combo of many things that are happening now. So at the same time, I just wanted to have an introduction here is we are considering movies or short audiovisual narratives to the present day world. I'm not talking about the varied platforms in which we see these things. It's probably a variety of many things. We come up with videos, we come up with websites which carry very short stories and reels. And so these kind of things happen. And we are always on the go watching a lot of audio visuals. And we are affected by it. We are influenced by it. And sometimes Gen Z, as we call them, tend to be a lot more influenced or probably a lot dependent on these kind of audio visuals these days. So at the same time, that's where the responsible writing or responsible content come to some kind of discussion. Especially in India, as I see it, there are good and bad content. At the same time, there is an advent or interception or intervention of the AI, the so-called AI also is coming in. So based on these relevant pointers, we are going to have a discussion. So I think Ravi also can have a word on this, that how relevant is content or screenwriting in the present day a world of technology and different kind of platforms coming up day by day.
Thank you, Sab, for the introduction. And yes, I think responsible script writing might become more important in the next years because we see dramatic changes happening in the world. So everybody who is involved in film industry, everybody who can speak to out there to the audience, to the masses, might think also not only to educate or entertain them, but also maybe educate them to share like higher values with them. And if you want to do so, then responsible script writing, I think, is a good way to do so. Always think you can reach millions. You can also teach millions. So that's something which can be done. And therefore, I think I would be very interested also today to discuss with you, Sab, on how to decide on what to tell and how to tell it. Besides the craft of writing a script, I think also moral values are very important to take into the discussion. And so what makes sense right now in this world today, to which stories to tell. And I'm if I may say so, I've heard about a project of yours, which I think is a perfect example of responsible script writing, responsible storytelling, responsible filmmaking. So I can imagine the audience also would be excited maybe to get a first idea on what you're going to shoot soonest. Thank you.
Absolutely. So thanks very much, Ravi. One thing that here I want to mention, or rather highlight here, is even in the earlier times when we come up with telling stories, we tend to tell stories probably spontaneously. Probably we consider this as a very sporadic activity, as long as you can handle language. This is a concept that we all have. I have a good command over speaking or writing, and I know the language, so I can tell stories well. This is a point that I think we should consider here when we come up with the responsibility. There are two ways to look at it. One, when it comes to ideas which you convert to stories, or rather responsible writing or responsible telling of stories, apart from the language that we command, I think there are two things that we need to consider here. One is, what makes it responsible? Or how does responsibility set in here? Or is this question of responsibility a question which emerges during the times of technology? No, that's what I believe. Even earlier times when we used to come up with stories, or we still like to hear stories, there is something that is embedded in stories. It's not just an engagement tool, or it's not just an engagement activity or engaging the audiences per se. How do we engage the audience is the question. So generally, when we tend to speak about how we still like to hear stories after stories, see, that's what I'm saying. When you come to certain websites, I'm not going to mention what website or what apps that we are using. We come up with umpteen collection of stories, one after the other, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. We hear those stories. And sometimes we even consider them as a thumb stopper. You keep on browsing with your thumb and you stop the thumb on certain stories. And why do we do that? So there is something engaging about it. At the same time, after having gone through that story, sometimes you forget it, or sometimes you carry it with you. This is the point that we are going to consider here. What makes you carry a story with you for a couple of days or a week or a year? Sometimes you remember certain stories for a year or a few years. I still remember certain stories my mother or dad or my friends would have told me when I was a kid. I still remember those stories. But certain stories I don't. So what makes it happen is there is something which stirs me when I go through this story. And what is that stirring? Every story has every story. I'm not saying engagement here is this stir that happens to you. And this stir, in storytelling vocabulary, you might use this word as a theme. And what is a theme? Every story carries something probably lighter or even graver or profound, you call it whichever way, but at the same time, this stirring is called the theme, the message, or whatever you call it. And what is this theme is, and that's why I believe that we keep on liking to hear stories or seeing stories. You might have gone through so far 100,000 stories so far. And still we want to hear stories. We are not fed up hearing stories. So in this case, this stirring is something that's connected with our life. And this stirring is something that engages you because we tend to hear stories which are unfulfilled as far as I am concerned or the audiences are concerned. And I tend to like what others go through in life so that I can evolve for better. So this actually is the core factor of why we love stories. Stories after stories, years after year, as we grow up, we tend to love to hear still stories. So this element of evolving for better is something that we come to connect with stories and keep on liking stories. So in this case, responsibility is already embedded because we are talking about life. I always tell people or aspiring writers here is they say that, well, writing a story is a very complex activity. Most of the people say that movie making is a very complex activity. An audiovisual story to make one is a complex activity. Yes, technologically or making production-wise, I think Ravi will have his own views about production, how to make the audiovisual productions. But when it comes to writing a story as a screenwriter, I always tell the aspiring writer that it's not the storytelling is complex. What you tell as story becomes complex because life is complex. And we talk about life in all the stories. So the point that I want to elicit here or detail here is when we know a language, it doesn't mean that we are equipped to write the story. Of course, language is a part of writing the story. At the same time, we need to have a perspective of life which evolves through the story, which will influence some others to evolve better in their lives. And that, I believe, is responsible writing. Probably you can, earlier times, I believe all these stories were spoken. There were no letters. We were sharing stories, yes. And probably through pictures, cave pictures, cave drawings, you come up all that. But at the same time, now that we have the technology, irrespective of the influence or influx of technology, the underlying factor or the essence of all stories remain the same. It talks about life, some element of life, some prospect of life, some fear of life, some hope about life. This is what we see in stories or hear in stories. I think there is no division of religion or caste or race or country or language in this prospect of a story, because life is the same. So once we are aware of this aspect of story, which is emphasizing the power of a cause-based theme, and the stories are, of course, we realize stories are part of entertaining. It is a material for entertaining, or it's a prospect for entertaining. But at the same time, we need to emphasize this power of story, which is the power of theme or the power of life inside the story. And if that gets accomplished, the story becomes memorable. The story becomes a takeaway for some people to evolve for better. I think Ravi can have your comment about the German cinema and the German stories and the Kenyan stories that you work. Whether is there any difference in this perspective when it changes to a country or a continent? I can hear you. I think you're muted. Yeah. Now I think you can be.
Good. Yeah, we are good. No, I totally agree, Sab. I also believe in the necessity of telling and hearing stories. I think it's a main or a core part of the human condition. So we humans, we need stories to be from childhood till the grave, right? So stories are key to a happy living and also to a responsible living. But you were asking about my experiences also with German and Kenyan cinema or TV series. Right now, we are also working with people on the Ivory Coast and in Namibia, for instance, different corners of the African continent. And you were asking about whether there is a difference. Yes and no is the answer, because the need for stories is, I think, universal. But the way stories are told, of course, differs from continent, not only from continent to continent, but also from, let's say, nation to nation, if you want. And but the core of telling a story is quite the same everywhere. So that's also, we made some experiments. You're a professor as well, so I'm working at university as well here in Cologne. With my students, we made a test. So we found out giving them just 3 keywords, random. You take 3 words, now you have 30 seconds to tell this little story with 3 keywords. A very funny game, by the way. Everybody should play it, because it's really impressive that people without any training are able to tell little mini stories out of 3 keywords. And actually, somehow they're all the same, because mostly you have one active person who experiences something. It's like a mini hero story, so to say, or hero's journey, packed into a 30-second. So I'm referring to that because that's quite similar to what people in Nairobi do, or in Windhoek, or at the Ivory Coast. So actually it comes always to the same. We are all gifted to invent stories. That's the way we communicate. We love to do it in stories more than we love to do it in a factual way. So therefore, I think that's also the reason why film and TV series fiction is so powerful. It's more powerful than being lectured on factual basis. If you get me, what I want to say. Yeah. Then you were talking also about yes, there is in Namibia, for instance, we encountered a very strong tradition of oral storytelling, which goes way back. Also very interesting. So a certain amount of stories was passed on to the children and the others, and so on and so on. So you can see that it's like giving away the passing on some gold or something else, right? So it's very important. You pass on the stories, and you care about this story being told from the next generation to the over next generation. So you can see how important storytelling is for our human condition. Yeah. So yes. Yeah.
All right.
You were mentioning, I also would like to point out because I'm coming right now from a perspective or a point where I check on topics. So how can I use my craft or my experience to pick up topics and to translate them into good storytelling? And as I mentioned in the beginning, the world is changing dramatically. So there are quite a lot of topics to be told. If we want to contribute to a change or a content change, so to say. Maybe that's also something I would like to refer to later on. Yeah.
Great. Now, one point here we need to address is if for the attendees that I'm trying to converse. So suppose if we are talking about this responsibility in writing, you have probably you are influenced by something that you have gone through with your life, or you have seen something recently and you are affected by what you have seen, and that comes in as an idea to grow into a story.
Yes.
This is something that I'm talking about, the cause-based or the thematic conditioning of a story. That I think is the crux, or probably the germinal idea that you come up with, and you are motivated by this germinal idea, and you are pursuing a certain muse about talking it out to the world as a story. Then, how do we go about it? So this is something that I recently am thinking a lot about in kind of storytelling. Is the world is growing, as Ravi earlier said, about the change that is happening in this world because of technology, because of the machines coming into our lives, and so many things around. The world is changing. Probably it's part of the industrial development, and our life actually is changing to a different mode altogether. Certain habituations happen because of that. All these are part of this change that is happening. I still remember having read an essay long time back, probably about 20, 25 years back, and now I remember it. It's Huxley's essay, when he used to connect with a socio-psychic change as the evolution of man. It's a socio-psychic. The next part of evolution that we go through is a socio-psychic change, which at that point I couldn't comprehend it. But now I realize the socio-psychic change is quite happening to human conditions, human psyche, and human conditions of life, material life. So, considering these changes that are happening to a world, we are getting more and more socially conscious, and screenplays and stories that highlight the pressing issues like climate change or social justice or even mental health for that matter can actually take you to highly meaningful conversations. At the same time, we can relate this to profound conditions of life within audiences. This is what spectators or audiences. This is what I want to just mention as another point here. So such stories not only entertain but inspire action and awareness, making them vital in the creative landscape. This is one point we need to touch very, probably it's a very sensitive thing. I look forward to a conditioning of probably filmmaking and the stories being audiovisual stories being produced for social causes.
Yeah.
At the same time, the entertainment, of course, is part of it. In earlier times, I still want to connect this entertainment and the social cause in a different tangent altogether. I'm not saying that this is a very new or a special thing that's happening now. Earlier, even in Aristotelian times, or in the Greek theater that was happened long back, about 2,400, 2,500 years before, there were theater where lots of tragedies were portrayed. The plays were all tragedies. There was no comedy at that time. And at the same time, there is the philosophers started discussing about the stories that were constructed as plays, which had an entertainment called the pity and terror. This is the term, the Aristotelian term for engagement is the pity and terror. Now the pity is construed, or pity has another meaning in today's life and times. Pity is all about resonance and hope. That's what in Aristotelian era we consider the engagement of pity. And terror is the fear of life. So the fear of life is something every human passes through continually. I always tell in story classes that we as writers think that I can make a movie which will take to the world in another 4 years or 5 years. In another 5 years, I am going to be like this. We plan all that. We schedule all that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in the hearts of hearts, We have this great fear, what's happening to me in the next minute? We don't know. So this uncertainty, I would call it, is generic and it's universal to all human beings, this uncertainty. And we are taken by the fear of this uncertainty. So Aristotle has clearly defined one of the crucial engagement that we go through in life is fear. And the great hope of circumventing this fear is what drives life. And that's the most engaging factor of human life, is what Aristotle had given a meaning to. So considering the terror and pity, or pity and terror, is now considered as hope and fear, is the greatest factor engaging all stories universally. You consider any story. In varied screenwriting gurus or story coaches have defined story as an emotional bundle. Sometimes people say that, well, every human being has an emotional code in the audiences, and it is triggering and taunting this emotional code is what stories are all about, whether it's an audiovisual story or a vocal story. So this taunting happens, or this bonding of engagement happens as you call it any which language or any which name that you're given to that experience. This is actually or basically construed from these two factors. So I'm saying when you're going about the cause-based stories, we are touching human life, which already has this hope and fear, which is already embedded in human life. It's not a new thing, but we have to have a new consciousness about it to write responsible stories. And I really hope, there are most of corporates coming into this field of engagement than individual producers, because we have a great drive for corporate social responsibility as a cause. I think this session in RISE PECO is all about corporate social responsibility. So one aspect of this cause-based thing is to be committed to this social cause. At the same time, make the engagement with hope and fear about the varied prospects and fear that connect with human life in a social sense. So this is what I wanted to again present to the aspiring writer about the aspect of social responsibility or responsible screenwriting or responsible story writing. I also would like to have your comment, Ravi, on this point.
Yeah, let me, I like the keywords hope and fear, and I believe that's true. So if you break it down, then you reach this point of hope and fear. Let me explain you also how we try to develop a social impact narrative in Kenya, checking on the hopes and fears of young women in Kenya, for instance, because there was an NGO funding us to develop a feature film.
Screenplays are about unifying characters and dialogue and structure and the visual depictions and blending it to a story as a unified whole. Again, this is not a definition this is a definition that's been given by Aristotle 2,400 years back, and it still stands.
Absolutely. That's, yeah.
And one more thing, Ravi, all these people who have defined stories and structure of telling a story are not writers, they're philosophers.
They're philosophers.
They're philosophers. Aristotle was a philosopher. And Joseph Campbell was a humanity. He's a philanthropist. Joseph Campbell is considered the guru of storytelling with his writer hero's journey. He was not a writer per se. He was a humanist, and he learned the psychology of humanism and humans is what he did. So the aspect of human beings or humanism is what works with stories and screenplays. This is what I'm saying. We are all talking about life. And how to bring about the best of life and how impressively tell that story. You were talking about, you go to a supermarket, you tell a story about something, and you engage a few people there for at least 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and they remember what you have told you. Then you are a great storyteller, but there is some mastery and craft that you have put in to make that happen.
I agree. There are some people they know it, and nobody knows, and they don't know where it's coming from. But most of us, like 99% of us, we have to train it. So even somebody who is somebody who says like I can't do it, he can learn it. He or she can learn it. That's also something I think.
Absolutely.
You might have experience as a professor at your uni.
Yes. We need to learn writing screenplays. It is an absolute, or rather, it's a necessity for us to be a writer. Probably you may do with, see, there is a corollary to what we discuss now. Sometimes a guy who doesn't know writing at all will write something and it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
In that case, it works. I've seen so many people who are not writers at all, but they write something as a screenplay for the first time, and it comes out beautifully well. And that, I would call it, is a coincidence. They may not be able to repeat it.
Yeah.
So when you consider screenwriting as a goal or a career, and you need to repeat this as a career, then you need to learn something. So that's one point that I keep on. So the definition of screenplay, coming back to that point, the definition of screenplay is about these 5 elements of character and the dictum or the dialogue or the structure or the story, blending into the story with the visuals is the screenplay. And the story has some other elements. So generally, we need to differentiate story from screenplay. Without a story, a screenplay doesn't exist. And
that's true.
you are telling the story, and that telling is the screenplay, or the blueprint to tell a story well is the screenplay. And I think as a producer, even I am producing one now, but at the same time, Ravi may know that when you make a movie or produce a movie, it is telling of a story. I wouldn't say that, well, I told a story, but how well I told that story is very important. So it's not just about telling a story. It is about telling a story greatly well. That's something that we need to learn. That learning is not, I wouldn't call it a rule-based learning, because I don't believe there are any particular rules about life. So this learning comes from connecting with 100,000 other writers' experiences is what we learn. That may vary from story to story. So learning a screenplay happens when you have an agenda of going through 100,000 writers over centuries and analyzing certain things, what they have perceived in the process of writing and in the process of making that film, and maybe learn from that. That actually is the course that one has to go through in screenwriting. I believe and I always inculcate the novice writers only one thing. There are no rules about writing. Still, I say there is one rule. And that rule is don't keep your audiences boring. That actually is the only one rule that I believe as a rule of screenwriting. You can't afford, whatever is a cost-based writing or responsible writing, or you are actually eliciting a great cost through this, yeah, fine, great. At the same time, the screenwriter has an unavoidable responsibility, like the cause itself, not to keep the audiences bored. That actually is the essence of story. When your telling becomes boring, the purpose of story fails. The purpose of story fails. So what is the purpose of story? The purpose of story is actually to generate emotions, whatever be the emotion. It can be anger, it can be love, it can be joy, it can be jealousy. Through this emotional flight or emotional journey, what transpires in the end, the thematic revelation is what which evolves people. So if there is no emotion building, if there is no engagement, or if there is boredom that happens, people will never get the thematic revelation. This is what I'm trying to connect.
That's true. That's true. There are some very good examples where a lot of money was wasted because of boring storytelling. That's true.
Yes.
And yeah, and on the other hand, as you were mentioning in the beginning, we, of course, today actually theoretically, also people with just a smartphone could produce their own film. So it depends very much. What connects the big production with a very small and minor production is the storytelling. This is for sure. And to find an approach where you catch your audience, and your audience wants to follow you until the end. So that's something. You were talking about whether there are rules or not. So this is a discussion also in the film world, which could lead to endless discussions. Of course, there are rules and there are not rules. There are rules to be broken, we say, but there are also rules to be followed, I think. So it's always a mix. You always have to decide from story to story, from film to film, series to series on what to take in, what not. Yes, that's true. Yeah.
I would like to ponder, and we will take this point a little further up because of what is the rule-breaking part of it. That's one thing that I need to discuss here. It is all about one thing, Ravi, that probably the new generation, I wouldn't call it this generation or that generation. There is a cluster or there is a group who believes whatever is classic is outdated. Whatever be classic is an outdated thing. You call classic is an outdated thing. And I always need to be different. This is, I would say this is the novice writer's challenge as they look at it. So when they want to tell a story, the first thing that they think is, am I telling this in a classic form, or I need to tell this differently? So this is a big point to discuss here. What is different? What is being different? And what is wrong with classic telling?
Yeah, you might come back to the point where classic telling suddenly is, new wave, because you have all those cycles.
Yes.
I think it's quite a large discussion, because you always I think to come to answers you have to consider the environment you are working in. Consider what the audience wants right now. So what kind of series or films are in the top 10, what the colleagues are working on, etc., etc., and in order to define certain standards. So these things, because standards change after every year somehow it changes a bit. So you have to be very aware of the world out there. On the one hand, we have the industry, because we are also dependent on people giving us money for producing something. On the other hand, you have the audience. And may I also mention the third party, which are the critics. So how are they judging you? So I think we are always trying to
Trying to
uh,
be
for the three of
accommodate
them.
all
Sometimes
these
is not
pointers.
come again.
One
Sab,
thing,
sorry.
one thing, Ravi, I think we should also ask from the audience what is their take on this, the boredom of narrative, and probably is boring a very subjective thing from person to person.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes, I like you mentioning the audience. You're talking about our audience, or yes, so the ones. So we have
from
some
our
people.
audience, what do they think about the concept of boredom in movie writing? Or
May I, before we switch there, may I just tell you a little story? So when at 18, somebody told us, my friends and I, we went to cinema because somebody told us there is a Russian filmmaker and he's so great, etc. So we said, like, okay, let's go for it. And we sat in cinema. Cinema was packed with old people at that time. I found people at our age, but I found them. So they were all banned. So they were hypnotized. But we felt very, very soon bored. So we started talking with each other because we couldn't stand that. And they threw us out of the cinema. So, but there you are, same cinema, one film, same cinema, people all over, and the young people felt bored immediately, whereas the older audience loved this Russian art house film. So that's how different the perception can be, right? Anyway, sorry, just a small anecdote. So.
so I'm just probably I would like to hear from the audience what is their take on the boredom uh, while they watch a movie, or what makes them boring, or what's the process of that boredom that sets into them as they are in their movie house. Yeah. So I before I invite a couple of comments on this, I would say that, well, let us look at this process that we go through. We go to either a Book My Show app and book my seats, and I pay about $200 to go for this movie house. And probably if I carry my family with me or take my family with me, I'll spend about $1,000 for them as tickets. And I also consider during the recess time or the interval time, I'm going to give them some coffee and popcorns, which will cost me another $1,000 with Coca-Colas and popcorns. So it cost me about 2,000 rupees to go to a movie house. And then I show the tickets, I keep my family there, and then the lights go out, and I sit waiting in my seat. This is the context. Then the movie starts. The lights show, and I see pictures. So what is that Hema has given a suggestion that a slow movie is boring for her. Yes. So what do you mean by a slow movie? That's something that we need to address. When you say that the movie is slow, what does that mean? You mean to say that there is no progress in the story that happens? Is that what you call by a slow movie? Or is it a visual which is very slow and you keep on seeing a visual for a long time and nothing moves in there? And probably when Hema suggested that this is a slow movie, maybe a gripping movie, yes. A case in point in the recent Hindi movie called the Three of Us, yes, she was saying that, yes. So what I'm trying to say here is a slow movie is something which connects to a slow progressing story. Is that what matters? Is that what you mean? A slow story means nothing moves. I still remember when I was in the college, I have seen a movie where a guy was walking, and he was walking and walking and walking for 3 kilometers, and I was waiting for him to finish walking. That also is a slow movie, because whenever we see that there is a lack of progress in story or narrative, then you feel it slow. So that is what I'm trying to say, that the boredom can come in many ways. Probably you also can be, the process of boredom sets in within about the first 15 minutes of your script, of a screenplay. That's what I believe. Because as audiences, we are very benevolent to watch movies. Because we spend I told you, I'm spending about 2,000 rupees taking my family to this movie house. So I'm being benevolent. And when the theater goes dark and the screen lights up, I have a hope that I am going to watch something which will prove the points of interest and engagement for me in my own terms, of course. But at the same time, within the 5 minutes, I will be very patient to take that story up. 10 minutes, again I say that, well, this is going to get corrected in the coming few scenes. 15 minutes, I am a little restless. And 20 minutes through, I know that I did a mistake coming over here. But at the same time, I can just walk out of this movie house because I've already invested 2,000 rupees into it. And my family is also boring. I don't know how to do with that. And 30 minutes, I take my phone and start browsing my WhatsApp messages. This is what happens. This is the process of boredom. But at the same time, I think by being bored inside a movie house as you watch a movie, you don't hate anything. You don't hate. You can't afford to hate because you're already invested into it. But you become indifferent. This is the result of boredom. You become indifferent about that story, which is the greatest disrespect an audience can give to the storyteller. The greatest punishment a storyteller can receive from an audience, indifference. This is about, this happens with human relationships too. When you are in a family, when you don't love a person anymore, you become indifferent about it. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. So this is what happens to a story too. So Naresh says, I think it's such a complex combination of things. A great screenplay can be completely marred by incompetent acting. Yes, that's what I'm saying. This is a combined whole.
Yeah.
A movie is a combined whole. Everything has its own role to achieve It has to be, the visual has to be well directed and well conceived. There has to be a peckless, spotless structure to it. The characters have to be absolutely engaging, and the dialogue has to be absolutely credible, and a perfect structure, and an engaging story to emote. This is what the combo is about. And this has been contributed by many segments in the movie making process, and one has to achieve.
Absolutely. May I contribute to that? Because Naresh is mentioning that three of us with lesser actors would have been painful to watch. I totally agree. But other way around as well, sometimes you have a bunch of super actors, but you have a very poor screenplays. And again, it's painful to watch. So I agree, Sab, that I think that this makes it so thrilling also, and so work in film business. So many aspects to combine there. That's the art, right? That's the craft. So we have to take care of so many things. Yeah.
And one more thing, Ravi, I say that, well, my question is, okay, you promise not to be boring for too long, but you're still champing at the bit, ready to break all the rules, being different. You don't want to do anything that remotely resembles the classic screenplay structure because that's been done before. And you want to do something very unique, unprecedented, and something no one has ever thought or dared to do before. Because you think you are a rebel, you have a cause, you are an artist, you are a rule breaker, or an iconoclast, whatever you call it. These are all possibilities. But the moment you come into this boredom factor, you know there are things under sun, you are going to prove it. And let's start demolishing the rules. This is something that I always question. Because when you consider the classic so-called rules or suggestions, I don't call it rules anymore. There are classic suggestions that come out from 100,000 or millions of writers over centuries, over their experience. We need to consider that. It is like you learn statistics. When you quantify things, the quantities or the quantifications have a purpose. Doesn't mean that statistics is always true. It can go wrong, of course. But at the same time, the experience of so many writers over centuries has something to tell you, Tell something. So this being different, the urge to be different, to stand out from the crowd is a powerful impulse. At the same time, it can be being unique requires more discipline, not less than blending in with the crowd, standing out in the promiscuous state of being, a jumble of something like that. So what I say is being different needs a lot of impetus, a lot of work, being different. I still remember this movie called Irreversible. I think Ravi remembers that, Irreversible by Gaspar Noé, a French director, when he started writing from the climax to the beginning. So he wanted, when you say that climax is always the end, he started from the climax and moved towards the beginning.
Yeah. Also possible, yeah.
But what I'm saying is, it was not, when he did that movie, I wouldn't call it, it was fresh and new. It was already been done before. When you call it unique, well, it was done before. But at the same time, why he did a movie as a reversal or from end to the beginning, he had a purpose to do it. So the storyteller has to have an intention to be different. It is the storyteller's personal intention to justify certain things or to convince certain things to the audiences for which he can be different. For just for the sake of being different, that doesn't make it, is what I believe. Most of these young writers will have this being different comes sporadically to them before knowing their story. I want to be different is the base in which they
Main
start
target,
working.
basically. Yeah.
That's something which I cannot I cannot relish. I cannot find justice there.
Yeah. That's
So
true.
yeah. So coming back to difference, I'll again come to one point here. When it comes to the relevance of learning writing stories and screenplays, I'm not saying that we can discuss that in detail because it needs a longer time for us to discuss about it. But I would say, like you learn production, you also should learn writing screenplays and stories. There is enough to learn writing stories and screenplays, which probably every prospective writer or aspiring writer or novice writers have to go through and find some time. I'm not saying that there are hundreds of thousands of videos and books available for that. All these books and narratives about writing screenplays and stories each of them have its own relevance and truth about it because it comes from a writer. He or she may be writing it out of her experience, which is absolutely unique because I believe that every writer's product is a unique product. Why? Because it comes from his perspective. And a perspective comes from living a life. So I don't find any competition between two writers, screenwriters or story writers. Why? Because his product or her product is the output of a perspective, which again is the culmination of the life he or she has lived so far. So every book will say something which is different from the other. Like every screenwriting masterclass has something to learn from. I'm not saying that this is good and that is bad. Everything has a good point from the experience and the backup of experience across countries. So when Ravi says that he has a story about a football, a women's football team or a ladies'
Yes.
football team in India, the same football team that works in Germany could be different.
Absolutely, yes, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, of course, they have different issues, different problems to tackle. So they're already there. Then it's completely different. Maybe you could just take the core storyline, like women trying to beat men. So, but again, would be a different story, of course. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. Stories are considered as an extension of life, and life cannot be repeated by another person because it is your life or the writer's life or the audience's life individually and severally. So we cannot find absolute comparison anywhere. So
I agree.
Yeah. So that's one point that I want to discuss here, or rather to mention here. And another point, before we go in, we are running a little late into the question Q&A, which will start by around 9. At the same time, what I want to consider here is, another point I want to refer here is how a narrative idea transforms into a visual. Either it is a dialogue-driven or a plot-driven script. So when we consider this process of converting a notion or an idea into a written screenplay, and from the written screenplay, how it transpires to an audio-visual story called the movie. The process, how you go about that process, is something to be learned or discussed. So it's a process from the idea to script to the movie. So how do we go about it?
Okay, so let me try to answer it, because we have a very it's a very big discussion here in Germany. You have some kind of war between writers and producers and directors over here. Writers feel like they are overwhelmed. Once the script is ready, they pass it on. They get paid. They pass it on. Now comes director, producer, and they changed it into something that they did not envision. So more the discussion is coming up more and more on whether writers should also be part of the production and the direction process. So you even have classes now where writers learn to be directors because they don't want to give their story out of their hands. So just to give you an idea about a very current situation or topic we have here in Germany. So I think the story tells something beyond Germany, that between writing a story and a script and visual or translating it into audio visuals can be a huge step, right? So and there we are again to what Naresh was pointing out before. Then it's also dependent on who directs and how does this person direct this time, with which actors, etc., etc. So every little decision will change the perception of the audience, or will change the product, either in cinema or on TV screen. And you have to be very, very sensitive and very careful about that. Also, I think latest.
Sorry, Ravi. One point.
Yes, one thought. Also, something to consider is that, of course, in this in this industry where films and TV series are extremely costly, then of course the funders come in. So it's once the script is ready, also the broadcasters, streamers will try to rule and to make decisions on how a script should be translated into pictures and sound. So there are so many influences, can be quite confusing. So I think you have to be a very strong and firm person, otherwise you get blown away, right?
We used to have this concept in the earlier, I think it was a movement at some point, that the author of a film is vested with the director. Why it has happened when you learn the culture of cinema, we come up with this question of who is the author, or OTE, or author of cinema. The author is considered not the writer, even if the story is that of the writer and he writes the screenplay. But the relevance of an author that came to directors is he spends more time making the film, or more time with the process of making the film. This was one reason why directors were considered as authors. But I have this vision of, this point, this opinion, that when a writer writes a screenplay, the source of every visual that is on screen comes from the writer, the source. He conceives the primary visual that happens in a screenplay, in the movie. So it is from him. And after some time, when he sells the script, it is passed on to either the producer or the director, and the writer is severed from this process of filmmaking. The only connect the writer has direct with the audiences is through the dialogue he has written. Otherwise, the writer doesn't have any connect with the audiences. Once the screenplay is sold, he's severed from that process. So this actually takes toll on the perspective that the writer has put into the script. And the director may not receive that perspective rightly well, unless the director and the writer and the entire crew works as a congenial team. So when you make a film, after you write, that the process, okay, that's something which can be discussed longer, and I'm not taking any more time on this. But at the same time, what I mean is, when you go over this process of a notion of an idea, or a notion to the script, to the screenplay, or then you schedule, and then you go for the cinematography, and then you make the entire movie output, and then you release it to the theaters, to the audiences. The perspective of the writer may have been lost because it has been harassed by too many people coming into it, for good or bad, including the producer who puts in money so that he needs certain things to retrieve that money. So it's an industrial cause. It's not a creative cause. So when a few minutes before, I was saying that the entire industry or a writer's career depends on selling emotions. The sales, the process of sales actually is another angle apart from the true perspective of the writer. So this is the conflict that happens when a product is industrialized. So industry can't be avoided as far as the writer is concerned, or even a filmmaker is concerned, because you need to abide by the rules of the industry. So the journey from a story to screenplay, I would say, is from after you write or you go through an idea that I need to see it as a movie. Perhaps one guy will have an idea and he may not know how to bring that out. And he puts it efforts and he writes it into finally a story of a few pages. And then he converts those few pages as a treatment. And then he goes over a structure treatment called the step outline or the beat sheet. And then he shows this beat sheet to so many people and get feedback sometimes. And then the beat sheet is now finalized to a screenplay and formatted screenplay on a particular language or for a particular language movie. And then he considered this will be probably a speculative script, because the writer would want to convince a director or an actor or a producer that he has this idea which is completed. So he will have to give it for their reading. And then if somebody likes, the script will be commissioned. And once that happens, there is a collection of processes, or it's a dissection and scheduling, and sometimes certain things needed to be garnered, some things to be strengthened, some characters will lose for the sake of industry. You may add a comedian into it, or so many things. It is like a doormat. A script is like a doormat. And so many people will, I don't want to say that, but at the same time, I will see that they will just wipe their feet clean on the mat and move. So I personally feel that if script is going to be a doormat, it is getting vitiated by each entry. Each person stepping over it. And then you make it. Then you go for a cinematography exercise, and probably the writer who has spent about 3 years working that script and go to a movie house and watch it probably could see a different story, absolutely different from what he would have perceived. Sometimes, if he works as a team, he makes a narrative which is as good as what he made. So I'm not saying always bad about the other people, but at the same time, if you work as a team, it's a great exercise. So then comes the marketing of the movie, or the sales of the movie, and the theatrical release of the film. And this is what generally happens now. So this is probably is a process. I think Ravi will say that the process is more or less the same everywhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, all the questions arising out, all the difficulties also to pass on a script to a team. So it's very individual, I would say. It very much depends on each individual, how the process works, whether you can work together or not. I don't think you can set up rules for countries or regions. It's very, very individual. For instance, in Mumbai, you might have 2 or 3 film productions or TV series production running next to each other. The one is super, the next is horrible, and something in between is boring. But, all can happen in this process. Yes. But I'm always, therefore, on the one hand, I think we are very experienced, but it also could happen that with a new project, we suddenly are confronted with new issues and problems we never faced before. So therefore, I think this keeps us alive, right? So it's not a repetition over repetition. It's always new and fresh. So I think that's also something which has to be said. Yeah, but I'm not quite sure whether this, because as Naresh has also written something interesting, like about young filmmakers. Young filmmakers maybe trying to do something else than the films they were brought up, and still having big successes. I found this also a very, very interesting thought. So Naresh is writing, if I may read that to everybody, I've always wondered about the formula for a movie being successful with an audience. Indians being raised on a diet of 3 hours movies with intermittent songs and dances end up making much shorter Hollywood movies with none of its masala impact. Masala. I have always wondered about huge hits. There we are. While still being devoted to the regular 3-hour fare. So what really ticks? Yeah. So that I think it's a very, very interesting question, but it would take an hour to try to answer it, and we even wouldn't find an answer over there, right? Because I've written that in the chat before that of course also the big industries, streamers, broadcasters try to do market research with test audiences in order to answer these questions, but even even those studies, scientific research, are very subjective, because you're very dependent on the people who are sitting there in your test audience, right? So who are they, And if you go to another town or to another country, so what would be the result then? So there are no real recipes, which is why it falls back to us. So responsible screenwriting means also be very aware of your surroundings and try to to be intuitive and to guess, what could be the best for your audience you want to serve. That's something.
One point I realize here is the pitching part of it. After you have a script or you have a story, there are three ways to look at writing a story to make it better and probably to work it to a condition which is demanding. Depends on after your first draft. It happens only after your first draft. Because once you write a script to a first draft. Only then you can have an assessment about what you have written as a writer. Till then, it's very fluid. You're here and there, and you don't know where exactly is the direction you are treading on and what actually are the theses that you are trying to prove, how you transfer that thesis to a thematic experience by itself. So you don't know that. So once you try with that first draft and then you try rewriting it, is the process where the actual writing happens. Or rather, you try to chisel it, you try to polish it, you try feedback from your close friends as to read it, and you bounce it to so many people. So when you bounce your story to so many people, young writers think that, well, I am going to lose my story. It is not like that. When you tell the story to 100 people, you are getting more and more confident about your telling. 100 different people. And the more you talk about it, the more corrections you make as you tell the story. And you also get a kind of some sublime, or sometimes it's silly, or sometimes it's vague, or sometimes it's very crucial. 1-2 lines that you get from a feedback is crucial for your rewrite. And then what happens is, in this process, while you chisel and polish your drafts, probably I would say every writing is rewriting. Every writing is good script is about rewriting. And when you rewrite, you get the confidence of telling the story or pitch your story. And that is equally important as you write a script. If you cannot pitch it well and convince people, see, there is another way to look at it. You know, you spend about 3 years or 2 years writing a script, and then you take it to a producer. The producer is not going to read that script, perhaps. Or he doesn't have the time to read that script. He will give it to his subordinate or a manager who reads the thing and give a nutshell or a synopsis to him. But if you can't pitch your story well, probably within the limited time that you have available, that will be a gross mistake that you're doing as a writer. So some writers may not have that talent of telling it well. So we need to compensate that. You know, I'm not saying that, probably some writers won't have that talent of articulating it well, but at the same time, pitching is another important thing these days to take your script to fruition or commissioning, especially with producers. Can you share how the story of Shago came about and the impact of it had, and what was the journey there? I think there was one example where the concept of responsible screenwriting may have been severely tested. You know, that's what Naresh was saying. I think it's for Ravi. There is some movie that you were trying to make, and that question is for Ravi. I think you need to unmute. Yeah. Now, I think we should go to the audiences to ask questions, or Ravi, you can answer that question.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I muted my microphone, but now I'm on again. No? Yeah, I think thank you, Naresh, for asking about Shagu. For the audience, just to explain what is Shagu is the title of a feature film, which started when an NGO in Nairobi asked me to do something about the upcoming elections in Nairobi. So this was, and actually I think they wanted me to produce a small film teaching people on how to elect, and that they can be free on whom to choose in elections. And I suggested not to do something like an educational film, but to do a good story, a thrilling story about a young couple who is torn apart between political parties. So to say a Romeo and Juliet adaptation, a very modern one, which plays in modern Kenya before the elections, where the whole country is divided into tribes and so on. So they accepted this idea, although they were a little bit cautious and a little bit they were afraid that it might not serve the purpose very well. Well, at the end, to make the story short, we wrote a script which worked perfectly fine for the purpose of the NGO, because the topic was translated into a very emotional journey of a young couple who tries to stay true to themselves and to their love. They are torn apart, but they find back at the end, and have learned their lesson that they have their own opinion, they have the right to have their own opinion and to put the cross wherever they want to do it and not to obey their families anymore. This might be quite interesting example of responsible script writing, because we had not only did Netflix take it on board as a feature film, it still can be clicked today, but also it had a huge impact on young Kenyans. So this NGO then received a lot of letters and emails saying thank you for this kind of story, because normally if it comes to elections and education on how to elect, it's very boring, but this wasn't boring at all. So yeah. I like this production. Again, it also depends on the partner. NGO could have answered me like, "No way, we stick to our plans and we are going to make a boring educational film." But there we are. So I like this NGO. Hope I'm going to work with them again soon. Yeah. Thank you.
So one thing that I find here is most of the writers or filmmakers, they just write and they want to make the film. They don't think about where they are taking the film to and what market are they addressing this film for. So this is something which we need to address. I'm not saying that I've written for many films in my career, but at the same time, now I realize when I am trying to make a film, I need to find out what markets are going to receive or look forward to that film. We need to address those possibilities or prospects now, and then probably we need to address it. That's one thing. Apart from the writer's prerogatives or intentions attached to the writing part of it. So these two will have to gel somewhere. These two will have to have a binding somewhere. And that's something which I am trying to propagate to young writers, that once they have an idea and they want to write it as a script, they also should find how to commission that script or where to commission that script. And they need to be aware of the varied markets and the funding or crafting a pitch. These days, a pitch also is a crafting needed. The pitch by itself will have a crafting needed. And that's where I am placing my project, which is again a test which I'm doing by myself, is to find an engaging script with a social cause, which is supported by probably NGOs, at the same time engaging to the common parlance, common audiences across cinemas. So this is a combo that I'm trying to work. In Malayalam, earlier we used to have these kind of movies, which was continually being made, where there is a social cause and it also worked well in the box office. At the same time, it had the cause and the theme evolving well and people receiving it by mass. So that is a test that I'm trying to make. Now, I'm open for any kind of questions here. I like to answer that. Both Ravi and me are can go for this Q&A for some time. Can there be a story which is a blend of love, hate, anger, darkness, sadness, and doesn't have to focus on one topic in the entire runtime of the film? I think most of the films that you see, Jason, are like these. When we write a movie, we usually fix. That's why genre come in, or a style or a tone of a film will come in there. When it comes to that genre, it means we are highlighting a certain emotion. What you have written here is a collective emotion. We highlight a predominant emotion. Let us say a predominant emotion is joy, or laughter is the predominant emotion. The joy is laughter. So it's a comedic film, let us say. In that comedy, you are not all the time laughing. You are going through a romance. There is love. There is a character which is very dark, which will come in, and so we have a combination of all that which will come by. This also was a question very relevant with the earlier plays, where writers were asked to write only a certain emotion, but and writers were able to write, or rather asked to write, only sadness. Comedy was not prevalent for plays. So between the sadness and absolute joy, there are varied other emotions that actually prescribed a particular, the writer started writing all these elements into a play or a story, and then came drama. That's called drama. So when you say drama comes from this range from absolute sadness to absolute joy. In between, there are varied other emotions, which is played as drama. So it is definitely, that's a question to be a good question, that definitely most of the movies carry those already.
Mm-hmm.
Most.
Absolutely. So I would, Sab, if I may add to that. Also, Jason, it's quite interesting that you are working with keywords here, like love, hate, anger, darkness, etc. So what my partners and I try to do right now is to focus very much on a main character going through a certain situation. So we are not talking about emotions anymore, first of all, but first of all, the journey the main character is going to have, and whether this journey of this main character is interesting enough for the audience we want to target. And then in the next steps, and the second step, we would think of what emotions this main character will go through. So, and how the let's say the color of the film would be, or the main sound, or the main atmosphere or something. This always comes later, because here because we had the topic of pitching a story to, let's say, a broadcaster or a streamer. If you would start here, I have a story which is a blend of love, hate, anger, darkness, sadness. I think somebody, a funder, a broadcaster, a stream would say like, yes, okay, that's great, but what's the story? So whom are we talking about? And what is this person going to go through? So therefore, I think it's the industry which forms us to go for the characters first and their hero's journey, and then in the second step again to describe this. The atmosphere and the emotions. That's the first thing that comes into my mind when I read this. Next.
Yeah. When all of us are just different shades of gray, why do we mostly see portrayals closer to black and white? Interesting question. That's something which is now currently moving, Ankush. Between the black and white, you have gray, which is absolutely, I would call it the realism that comes in. I think in most of the web series, you can see those kind of characters. Earlier, why we were sticking on to black and white characters is because for certain elements of engagement, that's what I would suggest, absolutely. White, I stopped using that word black and white to differentiate goodness and badness, So I would say that it is positive and negative characters and neutral characters, because in one of my sessions, I was also using this word, and in one of my sessions, there were some African Americans present there, so I was casually saying about black characters and white characters. So suddenly I realized that I shouldn't use that word anymore. And then came positive and negative characters. And why we need a black or white, or why we come up with black and white characters in all types plays to current movies or recent movies, is because movies actually deal with moral dilemma. So morality is a great factor in movies, morality. We are talking about the undertones or the moral fiber of life. So when you say your protagonist is morally positive, the majority of audiences would like it. We all tend to support virtue or moral righteousness, and we hate the villainy of morality or immorality. So this is a question of the good and the bad, which is always taken sides in a movie. The villain is mad. So, for example, I tell you, a Shah Rukh Khan will kill people. He'll shoot at people. And the villain also does the same thing. But Shah Rukh Khan is clapped at and the villain is frowned at. So what makes the villain hated by shooting, and what makes Shah Rukh Khan applauded by his act of shooting depends on the morality of his action, the moral support at the cause of his actions. So the audiences are basically divided or support the moral fiber as they watch a story. In every story, it's like that. But now we have come up with this gray character, which are more connected with the naturalism and realism of characters. At the same time, the gray always have shades of the neutral characters will always have the shades of positivity, because the character need to be likable. Why this question is there? Why most of the heroes are handsome guys? Why can't you have an ugly person or an ugly heroine in your movie? Will you cast them? It is primarily to attract people, because we all tend to look at a beautiful face or a handsome face for that matter. You can't look at, there is a movie called Elephant Man or the Hunchback of Notre Dame. We hardly can watch it after so long time because of the vulgar face or something which is abnormally, not watchable. So these things are part of the industry, for example. So these elements, you rightly said about the black and white issue or the positive and negative issues are divisive, but at the same time, divisive conditions can be for industrial purposes and for of universal acceptance. That's my...
Yes. As an add-on, I'd like to also to point towards the industry. So their market researchers show a clear winner if it comes to films which show a variety of shades of gray, or films or TV series who are closer to black and white. So the winner is the simplistic stories or the simplistic films, normally in the top 10, whereas like art house movies, for instance, normally are not as successful. So also the industry plays a big role in an answer. Why is this so? Because the industry does not want to lose money. So they invest in always the same. What was successful before might be successful again, and so on. So this is a vicious circle, so to say, which Sab and I try, to break every time we do a movie or a TV series. But of course, we are also mostly dependent on the industry and their roots. So it's always a struggle. Yeah.
Yeah, there are influences, Ankush, about the rich and the middle class and the poor people. These are all, that's what I want to repeat here, is that movies per se or stories per se are extensions of life.
Yeah.
So the differences or the disparities that you see in life is seen in movies too. Especially when you consider this as an industrial product, or when you club it with a lot of, as Ravi was saying, about a lot of investment goes into it. And they have some kind of an identity to retrieve the money. For that, they make nuances. These nuances are made exclusively for the industrial successes. So that is something. So I'm not saying that you can restrict it to the rich and the poor and the middle class. The engagement of the story depends on many other factors other than these two, a few things, but especially with the music, and that also plays a great role in there. Even earlier, we used to have these movies with great dance sets, because of the song and dance, the movies used to run well. Why we consider songs as a unavoidable factor in Indian movies is we have a certain culture. I'm actually doing a market research or a research study on that, basically, because apart from the Western thoughts of writing stories, which comes mostly from Aristotle, the basic things came from Aristotle, but in Indian culture there was much before Aristotle, or at par with the Greek theater that was running at that time, we had this Natya Shastra, which had more relevant conditions of human drama and the experience of the varied emotions in Natya Shastra. So we have a lot of comparatives that way, but still song was an unavoidable factor to carry emotions. Like you talk about lullabies. It starts from lullaby. How we are connected with music is the humming of the mother to make you sleep. It starts from there. And song and dance, you call it, I have a reason for the Indian movies. Even Aristotle had written songs because there was no prose at those times when it was when stories were being told. There can only be poems at those times. So he had actually written, among the 5 important tenets of storytelling, he also had written songs. Songs as an unavoidable factor for emotion building, and how it unifies so many things of the tenets of storytelling. It was all there. But in Indian concept, I always believe, when you see, for example, there are 5 songs in a movie, let us say. When you consider the division of these 5 songs, I would say the 3 songs will be for song's sake, where the couple will go to a very picturesque place or a scenic place and they shoot that song. The psyche behind it, as I see it, is you are seeing a beautiful place which relieves the audience in two ways. One, they are looking at a picturesque place means that immediately brings in the effect of dopamine into the audience. This is one intrinsic factor for that. When you are looking at a panorama, when you're looking at a large space or a big mountain, you are looking at a big mountain over, psychologically, dopamine is secreted by brain and you get a sense of well-being into it. And when you look at a very constrictive, close visual, you are added tension and desperation. That's a psychological need. So this has actually gone into some kind of a theory or some kind of a repeated experience, and songs were blended into it. And we have this Natyam, the Bharatanatyam and varied types of dance forms that were into our culture. That also actually is relieving to us as a cultural feat, and how music will play to the melodies, how the melodies are going to play and suit you. So this has been blended. So I have to very, very bluntly, I'm not derogating the producers, but I'm talking something that used to happen when I was into my career. Producers never wanted, the moment you start to pitch and talk stories, they sleep. They doze off. This was my experience. And I had to touch the table and make some noises to wake them up. And so after some time, they ask you, okay, how many songs are there in this movie? I say, this is what they ask. I'm not exaggerating. How many songs are there in this movie? How many fights are there in this movie? These are the two questions they ask. Songs, how many fights? Okay, now I realize there is a logic behind it. The logic is, when I say there are 5 fights in the film, they are saying there are some 5 crucial conflicts. They know that. 5 crucial conflicts is there in that fight. Otherwise, the fight won't happen. And when I say 5 songs, he says they understand that there are 5 situations of love or some emotional values are there before that song. Only then the song will exist.
Mm.
So it is a very blunt theory which worked. The movies they produced also ran into 100 days and 3 days. They never heard the story. Hearing the story was left for the actors to hear the story and accept it, and they produced the film. So this is what the culture was, basically. So what I'm trying to say here is songs have been embedded into a culture that we are in, and songs are inseparable in the storytelling feat or the process of storytelling from early days, from Natya Shastra. And the concept of dance and the concept of movies probably have different tones altogether or different angles from the narrative part of it. But at the same time, there is an emotion building out of it by those visuals. That is something. As screenwriters, how much you influence the direction? I'm sure you run the movie in your head before it actually gets accepted for production. Do you feel unsettled if the depiction is not close to your imagination? Of course, there is no doubt about it, because it's your baby. And you write something out through your effort. Maybe you take about 6 months to write a script or 1 year to write a script, and then you don't see what you have written in there. Well, you get affected by it. But at the same time, there are 2 ways to look at it. How you engage yourself with that team is very, very crucial. Recently, I was watching an interview by, I forgot the name of that person. It is a Will Smith movie where Will Smith was acting as Serena Williams' father. I think it is King Richard. I think King Richard is the name of the film, if I remember right. And when I was reading through the writer's travel to make that film, we almost spent about 4 years to get that script done. 4 years. He had been to a few. It started with one of the U.S. Open tennis matches where he got the idea, why can't I make a movie based on these tennis courts and kind of. And then he had a travel of 4 years. Then he went to Serena Williams' family and then got permissions and blah blahs. And finally it was pitched to actors, and finally Will Smith came into it. And it came as a wonderful film, basically, came out. And it was a successful film too. But in the interview, I was watching that interview where all those were participating in the production as actors and producers. And this writer was seen somewhere in one corner. And the fun part of it was the anchor never had time to ask a question to this writer. That was the fate. Probably he could be a happy man being there on stage when this interview was being made. So it happens. And how we take it up and move it to another project is a process for writers. It is a process for writers. That's what I want to say.
Yeah,
So
and maybe
nobody,
there's also a trick. So that's the reason why I'm writing and directing and producing. so, so I can take the story, with me and try to do it the way I see it. Number one, number two. But of course, I also had experiences where I conducted the script writing. For instance, Country Queen, a series on Netflix. We conducted the script writing over 2 years or even longer. And then we had to contract 3 different directors. So this was hard to see, and also very interesting to see how different the 3 directors approached the storyline. And sometimes it was also hard to see how they failed in getting the clue of a certain scene. But we as showrunners they also could influence them, saying like stop and bring them back to the vision we had before. May I also point out to Naresh's comment, which he wrote a few minutes ago, in recent times a number of movies have been made that have glorified a negative character, Joker. Would that also be attributed to market compulsions, or is there any large shift in society that is being reflected on the screen? My answer to that, I'm not quite sure whether this is a new development, because throughout film history, you had here or there films not glorifying, but telling the story of negative characters, putting negative characters into the center of the story. But yes, I think also that the shift in societies and also in the global shift right now, we are facing a lot of crisis also in Europe, for instance. I think it has an influence on the way you perceive the world, and also on the way you write characters, and maybe also on the way broadcasters or streamers are deciding on which character to tell and which story to tell. So, yeah.
and one more there is in that movie.
One thought, but it might also be a therapy for the writers and filmmakers to deal with the negative character, to ask why, where is this negativity coming from? So it might be also something cathartic. You say cathartic in English? I'm not quite sure, but
yeah.
Mm.
And Naresh, for that matter, just one thing before we conclude. In Joker is not a completely negative character, but there is also a discussion about how we become one.
Yeah. Mm.
So that is the question, where the question of life happens there. So the theme actually reveals that the society made him as one, what he is. So it's been done. So I think we are running later, about 8 minutes gone. So I think we can wind up, and I thank Ravi for his wonderful presence here. Nice talking to you, Ravi. And I thank this platform, RISE PECO, to give us this great opportunity to talk wonderful and inclusive and participating as it is. This RISE PECO kind of platforms actually generate a lot of prospects to the life itself. So I congratulate the organizers and Naresh and all who are involved in this activity. I'm so happy and thankful to you, Naresh. Thank you very much to all those who participated in this program by their presence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sab and Ravi. I mean, it was very, very interesting because you could make out, the wealth of experience that you brought to the conversation, and coming from literally three different industries, as it were, and we're seeing a lot of similarities as well. Because, as I think you pointed out, at the end of it, movies are about human beings, and at the fundamental level, I think for human beings across the world are the same. Maybe the outward kind of manifestations may be different, but emotions are the same. And the concepts of good and evil, though you may have a little graying at the edges, so to say, but they still remain the same over the years. But it's very interesting to learn about the journey of screenwriting. And I know 2 hours don't do justice to a topic like this. I mean, no wonder you all run all these long workshops. But I hope the audience which was here, and also those who are going to watch the recording of this, because the recording of this is going to go on to the RISE platform and on YouTube later. And we would love you to even share that. People would actually go back, and there are a lot of learning that I think people will take back from this. So thank you so much, I mean, for sparing such a lot of time with us and enhancing this whole summit by this very insightful, take on responsible screenwriting. So thank you so much again. We have another 2 days of amazing sessions to go in the RISE PecoWorld Summit 2025, and finally culminating in the closing plenary on Saturday, the 1st of February. Ravi and Sab, of course, it's an invitation for you to just join in whichever sessions that you would like to. But it's also for everybody who's out here, do tune in. Do also catch up on the sessions you have missed out since Monday, because there's so much of learning that's happening out here with 80 plus organizations and more than 100 guest speakers and very, very established people and organizations. And one of the biggest things that we do in the RISE PecoWorld Summit is we create connections and collaborations. So that's something which the audience can also explore. There's a way you can connect with everybody out here, including Sab and Ravi. And incidentally, for both of you, Ravi and Sab, there's a very new technical innovation that's been added this time to the RISE PecoWorld platform, and that's in the form of lounges. So if somebody wants to connect with somebody, just have a short conversation with 3, 4, 5 people. You can actually say, hey, you know what, I'll meet you in the lounge. And you can go there at a particular time, and you can invite people, and they can talk with you and get the questions answered, or just have a general discussion on things. So in case either of you or anybody for that matter would like to use that facility, do reach out to us, and we'll be happy to facilitate that as well. So with that, let me say good night to you, and good evening, good night, good afternoon, wherever you are in this world. Thank you for joining in, and stay well, stay healthy. Goodbye.